So, welcome to Bonehead Weekly. Today we have the writer extraordinaire, John C. Foster. How are you doing, sir?
I am good. I'm glad to be here. And it's Friday night, so it's got to be good.
It's Friday night, and you're talking to two guys in Kentucky.
That's right.
Means you have no life. We love you. We appreciate it.
Dude, I'm a writer.
I know. I know. So, it's our pleasure. James, you booked him, right?
Yeah. Well, he wandered in. He didn't tell me no.
James, you're awful. You're awful for segues. But anyway,
I suck at segues.
So, what does that say behind you? Famous author?
Oh shit! Yeah, another wonderful writer and a friend of mine is Eric Nunnally. And I went to. This is it. He also is a designer, a graphic designer. So I went to Providence where he lives, and we were doing a book signing at a bookstore in the area. And he met me at the train station. And he just as he's sitting there with his Hyundai or whatever it was, but as if it was a livery car, and he was waiting with a sign that just said this, which was pretty funny. So I kept it because.
Well, if it makes you feel better, not the first time I did a convention, but the first time we did a convention as Bonehead Weekly, like we had our own table and something, and we were actual guests. The placard, it's in my garage. It's just a piece of paper, but it says it, and I've just kept it. So
did you guys just do the Imaginarium?
No, I did not do an Imaginarium, and I have a wonderful story I'll tell you right after this podcast that I won't say in person.
Okay.
But there's a story there between me and the folks who run the Imaginarium, and I will tell you I'm extremely professional.
I'm glad to hear it.
That's the reason why I won't tell you the story till after this podcast. But a friend of ours is there, Laurel Hightower.
That's how I found out about you guys.
Yeah, she's a dear friend. We love her writing. We were friends. I shouldn't say we were friends before she was a famous author, but we were friends before our kids play together.
Oh, neat. Yeah, this is one of those small world things. My wife is an audiobook narrator.
Yeah.
And she narrated Crossroads.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, so it's just it's all the worlds are overlapping.
It's one of the good things about social media and the internet.
Mm-hmm.
One of the few good things. You and I would never have this conversation beforehand, and we would never make all these connections. But because of her just happening to be here, and then us being friends, and and then a lot of times this happens. We had Mick Garris, the director, on the show.
Mm-hmm. Oh, nice.
But we had someone else on, and he said I checked with Mick, and we thought it was a friend of ours who's a production designer named Mick, who's been very close to us, but it wasn't. It was Mick Garris, and he gave us a good review, and I was like, hell yeah, after I realized it later on. And it was 6 months after. We're getting off topic. You were going to tell me something. You were going to recite a story or maybe a poem?
Yes, I'm trying to memorize this, and I'm going to inflict it on you. And
I'm excited. Our audience.
And your audience.
Yeah.
Yeah, because my dog, as I was saying earlier, is getting PTSD because I keep sort of shouting this at her. Jabberwocky by Lewis Carroll. 'Twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wave. All mimsy were the borogoves, and the mome raths outgrabe. Beware the jabberwock, my son, the jaws that bite, the claws that catch. Beware the jubjub bird, and shun the frumious bandersnatch. I think that part's going to be a tattoo. He took his vorpal sword in hand, long time the manxome foe he sought. So rested he by the tumtum tree, and stood a while in thought. And as in uffish thought he stood, the jabberwock with eyes of flame came whiffling through the tulgey wood, and burbled as it came. 1, 2, 1, 2, and through, the vorpal blade went snicker-snack. He left it dead, and with its head he went galumphing back. And hast thou slain the jabberwock? Come to my arms, my beamish boy, O frabjous day, calloo calais, he chortled in his joy. 'Twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wave. All mimsy were the borogoves, and the mome raths outgrabe. It's really tricky because they sound like words, but they're not words.
But and I was at a high school graduation once, long story, and the kid who was the valedictorian just got up, here's my speech, and did it all from memory. And that was it. He walked off stage, and
I'm impressed.
Yeah, that's a definite mic drop. I was the only one I think in the audience who was impressed. I think everybody else was weirded out by it. But
Right.
yes, yes. So that's fantastic. Why? What is drawing you to do that? Why do you want to memorize it just to be able
I've
to roll
liked
it
it.
off?
I've liked it for a while. I like that it is full of nonsense words
Yeah.
that are completely understandable. When he describes the Tulgey wood, Tulgey is not a fucking word, but
Mhm.
you know exactly what he's talking. I can picture all these things, even though they're nonsense words.
Yes.
And I've wanted some phrasing from this poem as a tattoo for a while, but I'm very lazy about it. And if I have $200, you know, that's just there to waste, which I don't normally. But I'm probably going to go eat and drink instead of getting a tat. But I want to try to focus now. So if I memorize this, and then I'll sound cool and literary.
You sound cool and literary no matter what. But
No, I'm a college dropout, so
oh, that's okay. We're not, and we liked college so much. Technically, we've never left.
good for you. See, you are the yin to my yang.
Oh, you're the first person who said that, and I thought maybe genuinely means it, and I feel bad now because I should be no one's yang. Now, I have a question for you that I've asked a lot of writers specifically. So
Yes, my friend.
we've had production designers, directors, and we try to not ask bullshit questions that you get all the time, but this is one of my bullshit questions. And I hope you understand it when I ask, because not everyone does. But what was the bug that bit you? What was it in your childhood? Sometimes Stephen King would say, why are you so screwed? The question would be, why are you so screwed up? That's not what I mean. What was it that got you? What was it that sent you down this road? What was it that led you to maybe not only creativity, but the macabre?
Probably two things. The first is that when I still have pretty ferocious dreams, but when I was little, I think my imagination was way too big for my little head.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't have night terrors because I've read up on night terrors, but I had pretty severe nightmares all the time. And I was just scared shitless of the dark and of the night and going to sleep. And it was a battle all the time. And I still can get scared of the dark. If I'm at a weird hotel and I don't know it, and you turn off all the lights and it's pitch black, and sometimes I'll just get up and I'll go turn on the bathroom light or something, just so I can see a little bit, just in case I need to, react, to something.
Right.
But that, and then in fifth grade, I discovered Edgar Rice Burroughs and the Barsoom novels.
Uh-huh.
And for some reason, I started a lot of series with the second novel. So I started with Gods of Mars instead of a Princess of Mars. But
yeah,
my mouth just dropped open. I was like, holy shit. There are flying ships that look like water ships, and they have cannons, but everyone's got swords, and this guy can jump really far because he's from Earth, and those dudes are green and they have 4 fucking arms. And this was amazing to me. And so that I think that really just sort of opened up the door, and really science fiction and fantasy, sword and sorcery was my bread and butter for a long time.
Where'd you move from Edgar Rice Burroughs? What was the next step?
Oh, I mean, it took me a while, back in those days, even though the little books that were, taking me a month and a half or something like that to read, 180 pages or whatever. But then as I went on, things like David Eddings, Piers Anthony.
Oh, Piers Anthony. I got into Piers Anthony as well.
Yeah.
When I probably too young.
The Adapt series and stuff like that was really cool. Anything with magic was cool. Lord of the Rings, of course.
Right.
Terry Brooks and the Shannara books. And then I think I started to stumble into, not to dismiss those, but just better writing of Roger Zelazny. And I found the Amber series. Again, I hit the second book, The Guns of Avalon. And I read this thing and I was just blown away. He had this almost unadorned prose that was so elegant and told such phenomenal stories. And so that started to advance the reading, because the Amber books are phenomenal. But if you read, I don't know, have you read Lord of Light?
I have not. No.
Oh, it's phenomenal. And it's basically, it posits it's another world, and a group of very super rich emigrated, it's in the future, emigrated from Earth or something to this other world, and they set themselves up as deities. They brought along a bunch of people that could be the peasants, and live in the world, and they set themselves up as deities, and they decided on the Indian pantheon, the Hindu pantheon, and they have a technology where they can move into new bodies when their body gets old, so they're immortal. And sometimes, for a century, one will be, Brahma, Lord of the Gods, King of the Gods, and then he'll switch over and become Kali, the goddess of destruction for another century, and they don't really care. But one of them is kind of doesn't like the setup, and he introduces Buddhism into the world and becomes a rebel, and it sort of gets Zelazny knew his shit.
Yeah,
you've got this incredible science fiction adventure story with these very, very deep thoughts that are going on. So that really started to expand things for me.
that's awesome. What else was going on with it? So you were reading any television, any movies as well?
Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons. I lived for it. I would leave my school books behind, but I had, all of the, at the time there was, second edition. So I had like the 5 standard manuals were always in my book bag, no matter where I went. And I was always just, it's funny, I look back because I know so many writers who are doing a lot of creative writing then, and I wasn't, except that I was, because I was just constantly creating adventures.
Were you a dungeon master?
I was a dungeon master and a player, but I would create all these adventures that never got played because I was just making them, and it was fun.
And you actually were born in Sleepy Hollow?
I was born in Sleepy Hollow, New York, which is about 45 minutes north of the city where I live now.
Well, and but
I know, Sleepy Hollow, right?
I'm just saying, I don't even know where to go with it, because I was researching you, and we were all excited about having you on the show. James has been trying to read ferociously, and I was trying to get all this background. Yeah, and if you're listening, James just held up a head.
James, I hope that by read ferociously, that meant that you were cursing and throwing books across the room and just being an asshole. And
well, he's an asshole, but he doesn't curse a lot.
Well, no, but if I do, it's usually well earned. It takes a lot, but there's once that standard has been hit, it does happen. But no, I think the and I guess we do need to talking about Dungeons, I got tongue tied. Talking about Dungeons and Dragons, I think one of the things that always kind of shocks me is it is so creative. It is you're pretty much writing the Lord of the Rings, right? You're forming what's going to happen, and then other people have to react to it.
But see, you're going to end up as a Satanist, James, if you keep playing those.
Well, actually, I've got that. The Church of Satan has asked not to be associated with them. They sent a very kind letter and said,
yeah, please. Right. What a better way to spend. I know it's geekery, and you have a very stereotypical geek background, like a lot of us. Yeah. But it's what a fertile background. It's so much better than just sitting there watching something and then just making it up on your own. Although I sat there and watched quite a bit.
I watched. I have a shirt on for, you probably can't see it, but it's Creature Double Feature, which on Saturdays in New England, because I grew up in New England, even though I was born in New York. Creature Double Feature on Saturdays, they would play back to back to monster movies. Sometimes they were like Hammer films or Dracula. But often they were kaiju, so you get, Godzilla and Gamera and Mothra and all that sort of stuff. And so I was all into that for years and years and years. But they would also introduce, sort of, I think, more headier fare, like the Omega Man. Have you ever seen that?
Oh, have we? Hold on, let me find my original I Am Legend over here.
Nice.
Are we into that? I don't know. I'm just being a smart ass, but no, that and Hellhouse are 2 of my favorite.
Yes,
of all time. I get shit for this.
Yeah,
but I actually prefer Hellhouse over another book called The Haunting.
Right. Yeah.
But I'm the one.
Yeah. It's one of those things. I mean, Matheson is a stunning writer. Shirley Jackson is at a level of her own.
She is, and we love the lottery. James and I have this joke all the time. You won the lottery. What kind of lottery, James?
Shirley Jackson's the lottery.
Sorry.
That's the only one I'm going to win.
What we're saying when we say it out loud, it's you won the lottery.
But Matheson's book Shirley Jackson is a literary writer.
Yes, absolutely.
And Matheson is not. And so Matheson, I won't say it's better, but it's more fun.
It's a haunted house book,
Right.
whereas the other one we're dealing with a poor person who is going through, lack of a better word, a metamorphosis and a breakdown all
Right.
at the same time. And yeah, no, and Hellhouse is a balls to the wall haunted house book.
Right.
And I actually, if you scan over here on the other side, I have with the Roddy McDowell, the original one,
Nice.
Legend of Hellhouse. But Matheson said before he died, that's the one movie he wished one of the movies that could be remade, that, they could up to date. But anyway, we're getting.
I actually don't think they need to. It's so perfectly atmospheric.
I love it too. It's so Hammer-ish because it
Yes.
is British in that, even though it wasn't made by Hammer, but it's Hammer-esque, I should have said. But yeah, sorry, we're not talking about your work right now. But
That's
I'm
fine.
interested in where you got the tick. So you left, you grew up. When was it that you said, I'm going to write, I'm going to create for a living?
I think I said it after a lot of people told me I should be writing.
Well, that's good, as opposed to the opposite.
As a student, people were saying that, and of course they all had different ideas. You should be a writer. That means you should be a journalist. You should be a writer. You be a good lawyer, not be a bad lawyer, because I hated being in school. So there was all that, and then finally. I left, high school was done. I had started to play a little bit with writing, and I had started falling in with the theater geeks and thought maybe I would be a theater geek. Really, I discovered that I just liked the theater and I liked the theater crowd, but I wasn't a good actor. So I got into the Boston University Theater Conservatory, and I definitely wasn't up to the level of the other people. But I also realized it was like, I don't want to do this, and I don't want to be in school anymore. And so I dropped out my first semester. Then I got one college credit work. I had a day job at Emerson College, and I got free classes. So I did an independent study and wrote a terrible derivative story called The Hound of Beckett Manor, which was The Hound of the Baskervilles.
But it's a cool title.
Thank you.
I'm going to, if I'm on Shudder, stop at The Hound of Beckett Manor.
Yeah.
And
so I wrote that.
It's a ripoff.
So that was my one college credit after high school, and I got one in high school for an AP class. And then I sort of learned how hard it was to be on your own when you're young and you have no skills, and lost a lot of weight. And then eventually I went to California. I said, you know what? I want the entertainment industry. I'm going to be a screenwriter. Never seen Los Angeles. Had not seen a screenplay except for someone on TV holding a screenplay.
Yeah.
I thought, fuck it. How hard can it be? Hard, turned out. But I did it. And so that's how I got my start writing.
So did you hate high school too?
Yeah. I wasn't, I ended up switching high schools. And I think looking back, some of the depression stuff was already creeping in, because like my junior year, I failed English.
Mm-hmm.
After that, I went on to AP English at a different school. So there was weird shit going on. But I shifted to a private school with small classes, and I had a couple teachers. I had a theater teacher I really liked, and I had an English teacher that Mr. Mees, and he was that sort of, he had the big voice, private school New England teacher, and he kind of scared people. But really, what he wanted was people to fight back, intellectually fight back,
to think for themselves.
Yeah, and stand up, establish an argument, and make your argument. And so he became a great ally for me. And he's the one that actually got me into AP. He pulled me aside after one class. He said, if you've got your shit together, you could be in advanced placement. And I was like, I hadn't even thought of it,
Mm-hmm.
So I did. But I actually wrote something, and I showed him a story once. And I always appreciate this. I wrote some terrible, dumb thing about post-apocalyptic samurai practicing 1,000 cuts, who then somehow, because he's done this, can cut the head off a vampire. And I gave this fragment to Mr. Mees, and it came back. There was more red ink than there was black ink from the original thing. But I look back later, and I think I learned two things. One, never give someone a story before it's ready to be looked at.
Yep.
And two, he spent a lot of time working on that story. And I have mad respect for the amount of effort he put in.
Yeah, that's
But
great.
yeah, it was pretty important.
So you have a very similar. So James and I hated high school too.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
So that's why you stayed in education.
well, the funny thing is, sir, is that I'm a first gen, and
Mm.
it was a way to get out of Eastern Kentucky.
Is Eastern Kentucky the shitty part? Okay.
It's the mountains. It's Appalachia.
Okay.
Well, it depends. You know, some people call it Kentucky no matter what, but we're very much in this little blueberry
Right.
and I'm sea of red. So that being said, I can empathize. I hated high school, and it turns out the reason I enjoyed college, sir, is because you and I are probably right about the same age, and no
Yeah.
one told me what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt that if it was all on me, I fared much better.
Yeah, I think I was still feeling like people were telling me what to do, like I had to be at this place in this class, and I just didn't want it anymore.
Yeah,
I wanted to do my own thing, which turned out to be, yeah, I lost a lot of weight because I couldn't do rent and eat, and you learn all those, but I learned a good work ethic.
that's good. So
Yeah.
the bravery just to get up, and you never been to Los Angeles before you
No.
moved out. So did you just have, it's one of those stories where you just have the car, you load up, you have like $400 and you're just going to make
Yeah,
your way out there?
I stopped in Tennessee. I got a speeding ticket in Amarillo because fuck Amarillo.
Never
you know,
been back. Not going to
yeah.
pay those bastards for that.
I mean, Oklahoma's a wash.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, they're lovely people in Oklahoma.
That's okay. I mean, really, it's just one shitty musical. Keep going.
And I was shocked, driving down because, my idea of Los Angeles was like, I had seen Beverly Hills Cop, and
Yeah.
that's not Los Angeles.
No.
And the smog was real bad, and I didn't realize, I'm driving down, and I was driving into Hollywood was much shittier than it's really been made a lot nicer now. The Hollywood part of Los Angeles, and
What year was this, sir?
1990. I was 20.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm driving down off like this freeway or something like that. And I look up and the sky is yellow. I'm like, that's gross. And it was just graffiti and none of the signs were in English. And I'm like, what have I done? And I got fired from my first couple of jobs because they were terrible jobs. But I also I had a night job. I already been working as a trainer in Boston. That's a night job. So I was a trainer at Gold's Gym. So that sort of gave me something to control other than learning to write screenplays.
I would have never guessed that, by the way. And it's not that you're not in shape.
I'm not in shape.
You were a trainer? How the hell did you become a trainer?
Well, in Boston, I bullshitted.
Well, that's how I stayed in higher education, but keep going.
Yeah. I was in good shape. I played a lot of sports when I was a kid because my dad was really into sports. And then when I was 13, I got into martial arts. So I was in really good shape and I knew a lot about exercise, not necessarily and I knew some about Nautilus and stuff. So I first got a job working in, there was like a Nautilus room, which was kind of the executive gym. This was the original YMCA in the country. It's in Boston on Huntington Avenue. And it's also a residential YMCA. So you had a lot of people that like had got out of prison and lived there. And so there was a free weight room in the basement and it was all just humid and disgusting. And that was not the executive gym, but I would go down there to learn free weights. And I learned a lot about free weights from a guy named Roy, who was before a convict gets out and goes to a halfway house, there was like this furlough thing where he was allowed out for X number of hours to come to the Y, and he would have to stop periodically and call back in to say he's still exercising. And for some reason, he liked this idiot kid. And I got a job being a weight room attendant down there, which basically meant I just went and worked out for several hours. And so I would lift free weights with him and learn all the wrong stuff. Because, I guess in prison, you gather all your shit and you bring it over to your bench and you have your shit. So I had to unlearn that. But I learned how to be a trainer doing that. And I started teaching free weight classes. So by the time I got to Los Angeles, I kind of knew what I was doing. And then I learned a lot more when I was out there.
So did you sleep in your car for a while?
I did. A couple of times, and that's not recommended.
Well, no, another friend of ours who is a screenwriter, Todd Farmer, he wrote the remake of My Bloody Valentine. Jason Tenney's
Nice.
from Kentucky as well. Yeah, he talks about just the trouble. Not only if you sell a screenplay, great, you got fed for maybe 6 months.
Mhm.
You know, that there's not the money you think there is.
Yeah, I stupidly, I don't know, stupidly, I'm doing okay now, but I stumbled from some entertainment jobs. I worked production and did all that sort of kind of shit. And then I got into development. So I was, low man on the totem pole. I read the Slush, that Unagents did the Slush screenplay.
So you read the screenplays, right?
Yeah. And then
Yeah,
I
yeah.
wrote up coverage on the screenplays and all that sort of stuff. And then the producer was independently wealthy and he closed down the company for a while. So we were all laid off. But there was a woman who had an office right next to ours who had just started her own public relations company. She had left Universal to start her own company. And so I went in to answer phones a couple days a week, part-time. 6 months later, I was an account executive. And one of my clients was Universal Studios Hollywood, the theme park.
Yeah.
And I didn't know shit. So talk about bullshitting. So I was constantly just learning as I went.
It
And
sounds like a lot of fun, though. Still,
it was a lot of stress.
yeah.
But I learned the important things. Like in any office, you make friends with the office manager. And if you're working at a theme park doing stuff, you make friends with the operations people. All the in-house PR people just piss them off. I made friends with them, and then I could say things like, I'd be told that, okay, Channel 4 is going to come out. We're going to do a live weather remote. I'd be like, live weather remote? I'm not sure what that is. So I'd ask an operations person, hey, where do you guys normally do a live weather remote? And they'd say this and this and this because we have to run the cable. And I'd be like, cable, check. There's a cable. So that's how I learned that. But I stumbled forward in that job and did okay, I think, because of writing and just creativity and the ability to develop events and stuff. And as the money got better, that was very nice. And it really took away from writing.
Yeah.
So I'd be working 70 hours a week and I'd come home and try to address screenwriting and already be exhausted when I started. So I look back and I wish I had focused more on the writing early on, but at the same time, again, it worked out.
Well, yeah, but you got life experience, right?
I got tremendous experience.
I go live life to write.
Yeah. I've been sent around the world. My nickname at one company was Traveling John because I was on the road at least a week out of every month, and usually New York. New York was my favorite city, well, long before I lived here.
Mm-hmm.
But Detroit, Chicago, San Francisco, Seattle, always that. Went to England a couple times, got to go to Tokyo several times. And that was cool. I was working, one of my clients at that point was a few years back, there was an organization called Pride Fighting Championships, which was a bigger organization than the UFC at the time. Mm-hmm. In fact, American fighters were leaving and going to Japan because they got paid more. And they were my client to help start to introduce them into the US. So I got to go over to Japan and work out with professional fighters. And for a martial arts geek, that's like if you're a basketball geek and you get to play with Michael Jordan,
Yeah.
It's, so that was fantastic life experience.
Yeah. So how did you quit? What? I mean, how did you eat that bullet, for lack of a better?
I was tired of doing it. I'm super stressed. It's very stressful. Once you get further up there, on the VP level and that sort of stuff. And I was at the place where I could have gone from making like good money to really, really good money. But the job was becoming less and less pleasant. Mm-hmm. And my job was constant crisis, and that wasn't fun. And I didn't want to do it anymore. I was just, unhappy every day I went into work. And finally, when I moved to New York, I moved to New York and there was a little bullshit involved again because it's the first PR job, but I lied and said I already lived in the city. And I met this guy on a Sunday for this interview. He's like, can you start tomorrow? And I said, no, I actually need to run back up to New England for 2 days, but I can start Wednesday. So I took a train back to New England, filled up some suitcases, came back, and crashed with my girlfriend, who's now my wife, while I got started and tried to find a sublet. That's how we just started life in New York. But, I had a couple of crappy jobs and I really just didn't like them. And I finally was like, I really need to focus on writing. And I started working on short stories and really trying to understand the small press market, and as well as learning the big five. At that point, it was the big six, before Penguin and Random House merged. But and I just really started working on craft, and it was so satisfying. And like I said, my wife is a audiobook narrator and an actor by trade, so she was super supportive. She's like, "You hate doing the PR, you love doing the writing. Let's do that." And so that became my job. It doesn't pay as well, but I get up in the morning and I'm very happy. And sorry, go ahead.
No, it's very impressive. I'm very impressed with it. I mean, because it just takes a lot of guts to give up a lot of money, a certain lifestyle, and say, no, this is what's going to make me happy. And I can never put a price tag on happy.
I'll take that. I usually think of it as a series of, I've chosen to do it the hard way again, which seems to be my path.
I don't see it that way. I really don't. So congrats.
But seriously, I get up in the morning and writing can have all its frustrations, and you've got all the mishigas that comes with that.
And it's lonesome.
Yeah. It's funny. When I started, in my head was very much sort of the idea of the isolated writer. And there's some romance to it, the isolated writer who also probably drinks too much scotch or whiskey or something like that
in a cabin in New England,
right?
Somewhere.
But I learned social media helped, but I started learning about conventions, and I went to first I went to a ReaderCon, and which is in Massachusetts, and it's one of those things. I didn't fucking know anybody, and I decided to do what I did when I was in PR. If I was in a town that I didn't know, I just sat at the bar and I ordered a steak and some gin and tonics, and I ended up talking to a couple that I'm still friends with now.
Yeah.
And then another couple showed up, and the kitchen had closed. And I had ordered, I have a weird quirk that when I travel, I like to have a room pizza, a pizza I just keep in my hotel room. So if I've missed a meal, I can just have pizza. Or if it's in the morning and I'm late for a panel or something, I just have a slice as I go.
John, you're talking to two fat bastards. We could not understand. The only thing that we understood more than high school sucked was room pizza.
So room pizza, yeah, it's become a joke that I have this friend, Gordon White, who's another wonderful writer. He's out in Seattle, but I disappeared from this meet and greet at a conference out in California. And I came back. He's like, "You just went up to your room and had pizza, didn't you?" I said, "Yes, I did." But I told him, I was like, I have half a pizza up in my room and you can have it. And they said, "Great. Okay, we're going to go upstairs, but we're going to stop. We're going to stop in this hotel room first and talk to a couple of writers." Now, there were people I really wanted to meet, like John Langan and Paul Tremblay and stuff like that. Wouldn't you know, it was a room full of John Langan and Paul. All these people that I liked their writing and I wanted to meet them, and they're passing around a bottle of scotch. And I'm not sure how long I spent drinking scotch and talking to these guys, but I do remember calling Linda after I got back to my hotel room, and I was like, "Holy shit, I just met all these people that I wanted to meet on the first night, and I didn't even know what was happening."
Yep.
So that was, and so it started to break down the idea of the isolated writer as I went to more and more conventions and got to know people. And then writing groups was something that I didn't understand, and I kind of abjured at the beginning, or poo-pooed. And two guys in the writing group that I'm in now, Nick Kaufman and Dan Braun, both wonderful writers and very, very nice human beings, talked to me about joining the writing group. And I was kind of like, eventually I go in and you have like a probationary meeting just to make sure that everyone's comfortable with you, and you're comfortable with them. But I enjoyed the process, and I've been doing it for years now. And it's a group that a lot of great writers have been in the past. Sarah Langan has a book out now called The Good Neighbor. She's great. Victor Laval is the shit. And he was in the group. In fact, tomorrow I'm going to be on an econ panel, and Victor's going to be on it. So I'm excited for that because he's just amazing. He lives in Queens. And I've been doing it for years. And we actually just this last week had our first real in-person meeting since the pandemic lockdown. So that was a blast.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Was it at a convention or was it?
No. We met in Union Square, which is a big big square. You ever seen the Warriors?
Yes, of course.
Okay. You
Come
know
out and play.
Right. You know the place where they're in the subway station where the guys were on roller skates and they have like bib overalls? That's Union Square.
Right. Yeah.
No, we didn't see any of those guys, but we met there above ground, and then went for our traditional Mexican food afterwards.
Walter Hill made a very stylized film. I don't think it ever really was like that.
It's dead on accurate. Yeah, no, it's not accurate at all.
Not accurate at all.
Did you know that the fox, who's the really smart guy with the curly hair, was supposed to be the main character?
No, I didn't know that.
The actor was such a jerk, and resisted all attempts by Walter Hill to sort of bond.
Yeah.
Hill had him killed. So the scene, he got someone who's on the crew who had curly hair and was skinny. They put him in the Warriors costume. And that's why when the cop throws him off onto the subway tracks before the train hits him, you only see the back of him. You never see his face because it was some guy from the crew.
Hey,
so they killed him off, and Swan became the main guy.
you taught a film geek something today. I do not think I knew that. Thank you so much.
It's fantastic. It's fantastic. I love that movie.
All right, I've been taking all the questions. James,
I've got to say, because I've got baby powder here.
Oh, I'm so glad.
And I've got to say that as I read through, and I'm actually going the highballing through Gahana, and I'm sure I mispronounced that, but I've got to say, it as I read this, it was the first one. I opened the cover, started to read it, and your writing reminded me of a quote, and I think of it as a great compliment, and it's actually something somebody said about Peter Green of Fleetwood Mac. It's not the notes he plays, they're the ones he stops playing that makes it work really well. And one thing that reading that first story, your spoiler alert for anybody listening, but your train scene when the train gets invaded, I can't get that out of my head. And it's because you give me just enough that my brain takes over and feeds off of it, and the horrors that you create there. And that's a theme that as I kept reading, I was like, you do such a great job. And I guess that's my question. When you're writing something like that, what do you decide to put in? What is it that triggers like, okay, this is my description and that's where I'm going to stop?
That's a good, first of all, thank you. I'm so glad that you like that story. When you live in the Northeast, you spend a lot of time on what they call the Northeast Corridor, which is the Amtrak lines. So we have, both of us, Lynn and I, have family up in New England. So back and forth to Boston from New York. So I had to do trains. And so I put trains in a lot of my stories just because I've spent so much time on them. So there are a couple things. There's a technical thing that I learned from screenwriting, and it's the practice of starting late and leaving early in a scene. So I want to start as deep as possible into a scene where you can still pick up the thread, but I haven't wasted your time. I don't need to show you the guy walking into the building and opening the door and checking his mail and all that stuff. I can show you he's already in his apartment. He throws a stack of mail on his kitchen table. You know he picked it up somehow coming into the building because that's what people do, and you know. And then at the same time, I don't want to belabor things at the end. When I get to the point where the message has been delivered or the lesson has been learned or the point has been satisfied, I like to stop. Sometimes I stop too early. But a lot of times I will imagine much more, particularly in that big scene where all those horrible things are coming to the train. And there was a lot more in my head, but but my approach to writing, I want you to do a lot of the work. So I want to trigger your imagination and let your imagination do the work. And I really, a lot of it is, and it's funny to say that it reminds me of like a jazz musician or something, because I have no musical ability. I can't sing, I can't play shit. I once owned an electric guitar with an amp. I never learned how to play it. I couldn't do anything. But it feels very much like a musician who's feeling his way through the tune. And I can feel where it's coming. I can feel the stop, and I stop. And I'd like to, if I can, when I think about it technically, but usually it's an instinct first. I want to leave you wanting more, and I want to resolve an issue, but leave you with a question that makes you go further into the story. So I guess, does that answer?
Yeah, no, and I think that's and much like as you mentioned earlier, when I was a child, I and still sometimes today, that fear of the dark was always and I really love horror movies and horror stories now, but when I was a child, that was completely like the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark was enough to trigger, nightmares for me.
Right.
And everybody else, it's an adventure film. I'm like, no, that's pure horror to me.
Right.
And obviously I grew up and I love Indiana Jones now. I love horror, but there is still that thread. And I think that's what, like I said, I think a lot of your stories really work well on me for exactly the reason that you said. I finished the story and I'm like, oh, that's effective. That's good. And then again, I mean, just creepy baby being part of a blob comes back at me at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'm like, I'm gonna go watch TV for a while. I don't need to sleep. I'm good.
Good.
And I
mean, not
think,
good, but good. Thank you.
No, and I think
good.
that's one of the things that really works. And I think the other thing that I really appreciate about some of the things that you write is there's still these relationships, like all the relationships really do echo through, be it the family or be it burial suit about, well, I need to do this thing for my father or whatever that may be. And I think that's one of the things that really carries forward. And segueing into Rooster, which comes out Tuesday, I think
Rooster
as I started
Tuesday, available on Amazon, I'm assuming.
Amazon, also at Gray Matter Press, the publisher.
Sorry.
and
keep going.
But I think because when I first started to read that, I'm like, I don't know where these relationships are going to come. But quickly I started to realize, I was like, oh wait, I'm starting to care about people now. And he's not immediately somebody where I'm like, oh, I'd hang out with him, right?
Oh, Rooster? Yeah, he's a troubled dude.
But it's a very compelling story and I think that's the other thing, that you blend genres to where I don't know what I've read horror, I've read fantasy, and I've read crime noir and all that stuff, and it plays with all of those, but you definitely blaze a trail where I'm like, I'm not sure where this is going anymore.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I'm glad it works. I have trouble coloring inside the lines. And you mentioned the story Burial Suit earlier. I wrote that long before, Rooster, and another crime novel I have that's with an agent right now called The Hard Six. But it's a crime story that has some supernatural stuff in it, and sort of a weird supernaturally goal. But I love blending those genres together. I think they go so well together for a variety of reasons, often because a lot of the bad stuff that happens in both genres is because of decisions made by the characters. Your characters don't have to be nice people. They don't have to be Dudley Do-Rights. You have to figure out how to make them compelling and possibly sympathetic. But compelling is more important. And those are two genres where you're never guaranteed that you're going to win. That you through the character that you come to identify with is going to win. There's a real serious chance in horror or crime and noir that they're going to die or end up in prison or lose their family or whatever the horrible stakes are. And it seems so that it creates a lot more risk for me than like fantasy and science fiction, where typically, I mean, let's set aside Game of Thrones, which kind of broke the mold there. But typically, that, the great hero is not going to die. If there's a party, you can identify which one's going to be sacrificed because of the noble one or something like that. But, in the David Eddings book about Garyon, I don't know if you read those. He becomes a sorcerer and a big, powerful, all the pseudo god and all that stuff, but he was never going to die. You knew that. But if you read a Stephen King story, you might die. And I read Night Shift, that collection, when I think I was 11, and that really introduced that idea to me of the vulnerability. Because I had been, John Carter of Mars, the Edgar Rice Burroughs book, he's not gonna die. No matter what happens, he ain't gonna die. And in fact, he's gonna win and he's gonna smile. He's gonna have a fighting smile when he does it. And you go to Stephen King or Peter Straub or something like that, and they're not smiling and they're gonna die, and it's terrible.
And it may tear your heart out as it happens while you're reading it.
Because you've become invested, which is outstanding.
Which is back to all of, there is no horror if there's not a three-dimensional character that you don't necessarily have to like, but can relate to.
Right.
That you can understand, that you can see, which is what King is great. I always tell people, why do you think? I'll tell you why. Is because every character in those books, them.
Right.
You know that person. They are a person. Yeah.
And he's so prolific that they're not all great books, but he's
of course not.
More great books than I think anyone I can think of. And if you think about it, like Salem's Lot or The Shining, get rid of the supernatural stuff and you have an incredibly compelling, immersive story.
Yeah. Of people dealing with their own demons.
Right.
On top of
and their relationships and all that sort of stuff. But then because he's cool, then there's vampires. Or a haunted hotel.
It's funny, actually. Salem's Lot's one of my favorite Stephen King novels that I don't think gets enough credit, but it's
my favorite. It's actually my favorite book, period.
Is it really? Well, it's one of the first ones that dealt with it to me. I know I Am Legend, but I Am Legend has that twisted ending of they're actually the good guy. You know what I mean?
Right.
Which is where the movies always fuck it up. The movies always fuck up the
right.
Because no one wants to go down with that.
Right.
But Salem's Lot deals with this is a disease. It comes in, it just takes over everybody, and it's like COVID or anything else. Anyway, we're getting off topic. I want to talk about you because I want to move into a question about a little bit about your process and a little bit more about the freedom you have with novels over screenplays, because you started writing screenplays and now we're doing novels and short stories. Can you talk a little bit about that? I mean,
screenplays are hugely restrictive. Sorry, keep going.
Correct. Well, just go ahead and talk about it, because they are hugely restrictive, because yes, you can dream it up, but down the line that a line producer is going to be screaming at somebody that the money's got to be here and we've got to get this shot today, and you can excise this whole half page because we can't shoot it because we're over schedule. And that's just with the directing, and that's before you even get in writing, and you're going to be rewritten 10 times if it's a studio picture, if not 20 times.
Yeah. With
15 ghostwriters who will never even be on the credits because the WGA will never, in arbitration, never give them credit. Sorry if for our audience this is all complicated, but this is exactly how this works.
It's I still like the entertainment industry.
I do too.
I came to not want to be a part of the Los Angeles entertainment industry. Writing, I don't think, is treated with a lot of respect. They're
the first ones fired.
Right.
And this is the writer.
And this is a generalization, of course. There are some writers that get great respect. You can get a lot of money, which is why Hollywood has traditionally attracted all kinds of great novelists and playwrights and stuff like that, because all of a sudden you go from getting a little bit of money, to getting screenplay money, and there's a different world. Yeah. It's also, it's a collaborative form. If you're talking film, it's considered still the director's medium, so they can do anything they want. You talk about bringing in other writers.
Yes.
So for me, that sort of existential foundation was problematic, but the form itself is less enjoyable to work in than writing a novel or a short story, where you're much freer just to follow the story, because you have some very specific limitations with a screenplay. For example, you want your movie to be generally, it changes, but 2 hours or under. and it's a page a minute. So you want 120 pages or less. So you're constantly fighting to get to that 120 or less, which really curtails storytelling.
Yep.
Then you've got all sorts of expectations that, famous action producer back in like the 80s and 90s, and did a lot of like Shane Black movies and stuff like that, was Joel Silver. And he had something called, I think it was the whammy principle or something like that. Every 10 pages there needed to be an explosion or an action scene.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now we're really burdening this with an artificial sort of thing. And then just the writing itself, it's very dialogue driven, which is interesting. And I actually like writing dialogue, and I still propel a lot of my prose when I can with dialogue. But you can't use a lot of descriptive prose. Your narrative prose is almost non-existent.
Because that's a director's job.
Right.
And you're going to, and the part of the storytelling is done visually. The way you set up a crane shot, or the way that it's done visually. That's the medium. And
you're blowing your page count because you want to be 120 or under.
Yep.
So it's very restrictive. That being said, it put a lot of discipline on me. So what we were just talking about entering late and leaving early and stuff like that are things that I brought from screenwriting, and that's certainly not the only way to write a novel. I mentioned John Langan earlier, and he's a much more literary writer, and his writing is very full and fulsome, and which is not the way I approach things. Mine, I look for, I shave off every ounce of what I think might possibly be fat, because I want a very lean greyhound, running from page one to page end. But other writers like Langan are much more literary, and it works very well. But coming from the screenwriting world, you're definitely lean and mean. And I enjoy also. Not all of my books are like this, but it's a style that works very well when you want to write a very kinetic story.
Mm-hmm.
So Rooster is a very kinetic story. There's a lot of actual movement. Run, the mafia and the yakuza and all that stuff is after his ass. So when you keep that lean, it really helps move it like a freight train.
Yeah. So all your books are your darlings. They're all your children.
That's why we killed them.
Right. When are you? So how hard is it for you to adapt it to script when the options start coming and the offers start coming?
I don't know. It'll be interesting. I had one guy that wanted to take a story from Baby Powder. I don't know if you read the story Red.
Not yet. No.
It starts off with it's an alien invasion movie. It starts off with a guy that looks like Howdy Doody walking down the road. He crouches down next to a dumpster outside of like a road stop, diner, and he cuts off his thumb or finger and he throws it in the dumpster. And but the guy, he wanted a free option. And I was like, there's going to be a lot of money you're going to wrap around this. I think you can give me money. And if he was a bigger person, maybe I would have said, okay, here's your free option. But he wasn't. So
yeah, that's the other problem is that is cutting through the bullshit and the actual players.
Yeah. Well, and I've been through that. There's a wonderfully evocative phrase out in LA called blowing sunshine up your ass.
Yes.
And when Rooster, I first wrote that and got an agent and went out around the town, and I had like 30 meetings with producers all over town. I was all over the studio lots, and it's all very exciting and wonderful conversations. And what came out of it was people wanting me to pitch ideas. First of all, the verbal pitch is just death for me. And why you're fucking asking writers to pitch an idea verbally is just, if we could do that, we'd be actors.
Yeah.
Really, I was asked, okay, what's your idea? The agent wanted to send me to pitch a Jurassic Park sequel. I'm like, have you read what I write? I don't know what the fuck to do with Jurassic Park. Yeah, send an assassin to Jurassic Park and he's an alcoholic. And, what am I going to do?
I kind of like to see that.
I'd say, let's get Vin Diesel on that. I think he's better.
Right.
I think we could do that. Let's steal that from him, James. Sorry.
Go ahead and take it.
Right now.
I mean, I love dinosaurs, and I enjoy.
And I love assassins. I say this go. It's a go. Right. It's a green light.
Oh, we genetically engineer. We take an assassin, and we genetically graft their mental engrams or whatever onto one dinosaur and
Oh,
send
yeah.
him out to fight all the other dinosaurs.
That's
With
right.
lasers.
And we're going to
on
clear
your
the
head.
island.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. See, we could write this shit.
I'll settle for Sci-Fi Channel.
Well, that's it. Another thing is that screenplays are often, referred to affectionately, quote, as, so yeah, that piece of shit that he wrote. Seriously. I mean, it was common parlance, which is depressing.
Or to have writers not even bother to do spell check.
That's the problem. Everyone writes a screenplay. Everyone is either going to be a director or a writer out in Los Angeles, and most of them have no capability at either.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I also, frankly, I like the Northeast a lot more than I like Southern California. So after about 17 years, it was time to come back.
So my next question to round it out so what is your process daily? Do you have a ritual of I get up, I write this time, then I have my muffin? Or also when you plot out something like Rooster, of course it's been around for a while, but maybe another novel, do you do outlines? Do you do any of that stuff? What is your process?
My process is, if I'm in a project, I write in sessions. It's all very loosely defined. When I started writing, I would have to really sort of work and almost follow ritual to like get in the zone.
Yeah.
And now I get up and I'm just in my underwear and I can sit down and start writing, as long as I've had some coffee and walk the dog or something. But I will write in the morning, and then I will write after lunch, and then usually another session later in the day. The morning and the after lunch session are typically more sort of raw creativity. Oftentimes the later in the day is going back and what have I written? What have I inflicted on the page? And
honing that down.
Yeah, cleaning it up, tightening it. A lot of times I will write scenes. I don't outline. And often entire scenes dump into my head. And so I will write as quickly as possible to capture the essence of the scene, knowing that I need to go back and create the world around the conversation between these two characters or something. And this is something that happens fairly frequently. And draw in the, just a technical thing that I do a lot is, just as I'm working on things, it's very easy to fall into the trap of dealing with only the sense of sight and the sense of hearing. So, what does it smell like? What does it feel like? What does it taste like? Is it humid? Do you smell, today, unfortunately, I've come back from lunch, the subway platform, it was very humid and it smelled like diapers, not good diapers. These are all important details that make a world come alive. So I'll go back in and fill those in if I haven't put them in. But in the broader sense, I do not outline. When I try to outline, and I have tried because I envy people that can, it crushes the creative engine for me. That spark that sort of drives me through. That I really, you ride that lightning through it. And I can't find it if I've already created, if I already really know where I'm going. So I've usually thought about things for a while, and I have set pieces and things and plot points that I want to try to reach. Like, I don't know how Rooster's going to get from, city A to city B.
Yeah.
But I'll figure that out when I'm there, and I'll figure it out based on the truth of the situation. Okay, well, he can't take a train because he has no cash on him. So maybe he has to steal a car, and where does he steal a car? So, something like that, but also really following the character's truth. And the only time that I encounter what for me might be a block is if I'm trying to impose plot as opposed to listening to the character. What is the character honestly doing, or would honestly do? And sometimes that causes stories to veer off in unexpected directions, which is kind of wild, because then you're just hanging on,
Yeah.
My first novel, Dead Men, that happened. And I was about halfway through the book, and this character, John Smith, who's a big killer guy and all that, and there's a big fight in Appalachia. And he had pulled this big wooden cross out of a church and was killing people with it. And I had been anticipating writing this scene because it was going to be the most bitchin' action scene ever, and horror and violence and all this stuff, and the rain's coming down and they're slipping in the mud and blood everywhere, and I just couldn't fucking write this scene, and it was killing me. It was like 2 weeks on this fucking thing, and I finally stopped and I said, okay, I gotta think. And I backed up, and I had not had this experience yet. And I think if people maybe go through MFA programs, they get some structure to learn how to do these things. So I had to just sort of figure this out. And what I figured out was, I'm not listening to my character. I'm trying to make John Smith do something. What would John Smith do? Well, John Smith, this is a fight that's actually for someone else that's trying to control him, and he doesn't like them, and he doesn't want to be controlled. What if he just stops fighting in the middle and walks away? I had him drop the weapon and just walk away in the middle of the fight. And I just, what if I just do that? Whole story opened up. Never had another block for the second half of the novel, no blocks. Because I had learned I need to follow him. I have an idea of where I want to go, but the characters have some say.
Go ahead.
Talking about going places, I think that's the other thing, and that we tweeted earlier. Your descriptions of cities and of locations and of all of that stuff, as we said in the tweet, they're hungry. Like there is this sense that these places are not just where people live. There's and in Rooster, we see as he travels from place to place, there's actually, that this is not this. This is not
right.
New York is not X, is not Y. As you go, you're going to experience this differently. And so I guess the question is, where do you pull that from? Is it because you have traveled and have been, had to do the job where you did travel so much? Does that infuse it? Or what makes you see, I guess, because you get the surface, the tourist friendly areas,
right?
But then you get that underbelly of what it's actually like.
Traveling, definitely. I love traveling. And I don't like tours. So I tend to, go away from the tours, which caused some consternation when I was younger. A quick side note. I went to the Soviet Union twice in the 80s because I thought I wanted to be in diplomacy or intelligence. And the Russians were the big thing. And so our last night on my second trip, I was 18, and we were in Estonia in the city of Tallinn, which is really cool because it has a medieval wall and all that shit. And the whole group was going out to like some fucking choir in a church, and I thought that sounded awful. So I grabbed my roommate and some other weird kid and some other lady, and for some reason I didn't do this, and I said, go talk to the concierge, who had no English, and let's find a good like club or a bar to go to. So we ended up in this cab. We stopped at some place that was full of army people, and that was wrong. So we sent the women in our group up because like, they'll talk to you. So she talked, and we got directions, and the cabbie took us to this place. We get to this sort of really nice club, and in the open, bar area, the men are all in uniform or very nice suits, and the women are in evening gowns. And then we sit down in this room that has a small stage and brass rails and little tables, and we're teenagers. We're drinking screwdrivers because vodka orange is the only thing we knew how to order. And so while the other people were at a church listening to a choir, we were at we saw strippers. These were Estonian strippers, and it was a burlesque show. And
your first stripper?
No,
stripper show?
It was not my first stripper show, but it was my first Eastern Bloc stripper show.
Well,
and
I experience one tomorrow that would be mine as well. So
yeah, and it was an experience. So yeah, so that's my idea with tours. So I don't follow directions well or follow plots to get back on track, I like to put people in the place and really make the environment come alive. And I have a fetish for two things that I anthropomorphize. Locations. So I like that, New York is going to feel alive, or the other places in Rooster, et cetera, are going to feel very, very real. And hungry is a pretty good word because the stories tend to be on the dark side. And they love it when you water the ground with your blood. That and cars. I name cars. I just wrote a short story and I named a car Deep Purple. And my wife, she always is subject to the first early draft. She said, "You named a car again." I said, "I know, I couldn't help it."
Do you love cars in real life though? Do you have a like
They're okay. I mean, I got sick of driving. When you drive in LA for a long time, I'm glad that I don't own a car right now in New York. Although I did for a while. After I got divorced, I had a very sensible Jeep Grand Cherokee, and that got stolen on my birthday. And I had just been dumped by my rebound girlfriend. And then I went out, some friends took me out to a rock show. My car got stolen. So I took the insurance money and I did the responsible thing. And I bought a 1967 Firebird.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Of course.
It got like 8 miles to the gallon.
Yeah.
And needed shitloads of work, but it was cool.
Yeah. Well, James, he's got you beat. You were fired on your birthday. So he's
nice.
Lost a woman and a Grand Cherokee on his birthday.
Yeah, that was that actual story was they had a company kind of birthday card they gave, and they called me to the office to give me the birthday card. Waited till I opened it, and it was like, and one more thing.
Oh my God!
It was all over in about 6 minutes.
What assholes!
That's a true story, though. I worked there too.
That's funny, though.
He said, "I've got a meeting." I was out that day, and I was like, "Oh, they're not going to fire you on your breath." Swear to God.
They did.
Yeah.
They totally did. By the way, it all obviously worked out well. I'm doing okay, and very rarely do I sit there with my hit list, and that's a joke before anybody calls.
Right.
Well, we've had you on here for almost an hour. We need to start going ahead and wrapping up, and we appreciate your time so much. But so. Rooster comes out when?
July 20th, which is
Tuesday. And one last question.
Yes.
For those people out there, I know you get this all the time. What should they do? If they want to be writers, they should. What's something other than just write before I say it? Because I hear that shit all the time too.
Right. Read.
Yeah.
Read everything. Read all the time. Read in the genres you want to write in, and also get outside them if you can, but especially read where you want to play so that you can write the kind of stories that you like to read. And it's okay if they're derivative at first. Everyone starts there. Ramsey Campbell, who's, this amazing English writer who's been writing for a zillion years, has talked about when he started out, he was very derivative and copying Lovecraft and yada, yada, yada. And now he's Ramsey Campbell,
Everybody does it. Stephen King started out copying Richard Matheson. He's talked about it before. He's given him credit for it. Yeah. Everybody gets through a Lovecraft phase when they're young. I had a Lovecraft phase.
Right, but read. Just read and read and read.
Read. Now, where can they follow you on Twitter, social media?
Yes, I'm on Twitter at John Foster Fic, F-I-C. And you can look for me at John Foster on Facebook. And my website is johnfosterfiction.com. I keep it simple so I can remember. Easily confused. So.
And they have all the links on your website to all your books, correct?
Yeah, the link to Rooster will go up soon. As soon as Linda handles the technology stuff, because I'm not very clever. So as soon as she puts it up, it will be there too.
All right, James, you got anything before we go?
And I'm saying this honestly, no money has exchanged hands. You all do need to read this stuff. It's stuck with me. I'm not kidding when I say I'm waking up picturing things coming at me in the dark, and that is the biggest compliment I can give, because
that's
it
wonderful.
Really does. So yes, I say this honestly as an endorsement. Check out Rooster. Rooster is phenomenal. Baby Powder is great, and so I'll be catching up on your catalog as well. I've got some reading to do. But
that's wonderful to hear. Thank you.
John C. Foster, you're welcome anytime you want to come back on Bonehead Weekly. This has been Bonehead.
Uh-huh.